Okay, we are now recording, and I'm Cheryl, and I teach or taught the sewing and craft classes at the library, at the main library. So today, this is the first of a series of 4 sewing classes this month. Every Tuesday evening at 5:30, we're going to be doing a different sewing topic. Today's class is going to be an introduction to your machine. Okay. I'm going to go over what the different parts are called, a little bit about what all the knobs are for, and demonstrate some basic function. And I've got 2 different machines here. Turn you around. I've got an old machine because it's got a different style of something I need to demonstrate. When we get to that point, I will show you what I'm talking about when we get to that point. So, the first class is Introduction to the Machine. Next week's class is going to be Basics of Sewing and Fabric. So how to start a stitching, how to stop stitching, how to turn corners, that kind of thing. A little bit about fabric and introduction to fabric and how you should treat the fabric, and some tips and tricks, that kind of thing. Third session is going to be, hold on, let me close my little thingy here and pop this down. I gotta do some stuff so that you guys don't appear on the screen, I think. Okay. All right, so third session, we're actually going to make a mask. Okay, so I'm going to make up some kits for a mask, and this is the style I like and that I use most often for myself. It's called a 3D mask, and it's going to be 3 fabric layers, but not with a filter pocket because those are a little bit harder to do, and with a wire inside. And if you are registered for the class, you will be able to come to one of the branches and pick up the kit, and I'll show you how to sew it in the class. Now, if you want the kit and want to come to that third class and are registered, what you'll need to do is you'll need to tell me. If you don't want to come to the main library, if you can't get down here, you'll need to tell me which branch to send the kit to at least a couple of days ahead of time so that I can get it time to get it shipped out to the other branch for you to pick up. Okay. You'll get in the kit all the fabric, the elastic, the little nose wire, everything you need, and you'll get a template for more masks to cut more fabric. Oh yeah, and I'll tell you where I got the basic mask kit or mask pattern, and the place I got it actually has different sizes. So if you're wanting to do different sizes of masks for like kids or big guys, I'll include the PDF of the instructions of where I got it. And she has her own video about making it so that you can review that too. And each one of these sessions I will record and send you a link to it at the end, or tomorrow, probably tomorrow. And the fourth class is going to be more about some a little trickier things in sewing, like how to sew around curves and what you have to do, because if you're sewing garments, it's not all straight lines. You know, you have to sew around curves, and then you have to press them in, they have to clip some of the seams. And so that's what we're going to handle in the other class, the fourth class. And if you guys want, if there's enough interest in it, I can continue this on once a month, dealing with different topics. Like I saw a video on YouTube a couple days ago that I thought might be interesting for me to do for you guys about patterns. How to handle patterns and what you need to do to prepare them, and what the different things are on the patterns and the markings and all of that stuff. So I thought that would be maybe a class I'll do maybe next month if you guys are interested. Okay.
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay. And so for those of you who just joined, this is being recorded. So if you speak up, your face might show. So if you don't want that to happen, at the bottom of your your screen or your app or whatever you're using should be a button to stop your video, and that will let you, your face will be blacked out. But if you, there's also a button for a, that's like a little microphone button that says unmute. If you ask me a question and I don't respond, it's probably because you're muted and I didn't hear you. Because everybody is muted when they first, I think I have everybody set to be muted when they first come in, so that I can get the introductory junk out of the way. Okay. All right. So your sewing machine. There's lots of terminology, but basically most sewing machines will work exactly the same way unless if they're not computerized. Okay. We're not going to go over the computerized ones. They have manuals and videos and stuff for you to do for that. So to start with, the parts of your machine. On the top, usually on the back or on the top right hand, will be where your thread goes. If you have a brand new machine, now this one is, it's an old machine that we used to use for the sewing classes, the home ec classes at the school. So this is a very old machine. It's probably at least 15 years old. We've had it for 6 years, so I know it's much older than that. Those will usually have a thing in the right hand side or in the back to stick up where you put your thread. Newer machines will usually have like an indented part here where you slip the thread on sideways like this, and the thread comes off this way. So that's what the new machines will look like. Now, the weird part is what kind of thread you use works differently for the different machines. And here is like a different kinds of threads. And this is a variegated thread, so you can actually see it. Some threads are just wrapped around and around and around the spool this way. And some of them are wrapped so that they crisscross. If you have one of these older machines or one that sits up like this, straight up and down, you want the thread that's wrapped this way. If you have one that goes in the little slot and it's fed out sideways, you want one of the ones that crisscross. Because if you put one of these, I mean, this will work if you put it back here on a straight up and down one, but it tends to not feed off the spool properly. And so you might find it wrapping around your thing. It might start spinning when it shouldn't. And so if your thing starts spinning, you're sewing and it starts spinning and gathering up here, it's probably because you've got one like this when you should buy thread that is like this.
So it should be thread.
Yeah, it's just a little weird little thing.
So what is the word for this?
Oh, I'm sorry?
What is the word for this thread thing? What you were just explaining.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to turn this up. Okay.
So what is the term for this thing that holds the thread? That
thread holder.
In newer machine, thread holder, even here in the middle?
Yeah. As far as I know, there's not a technical word for that.
So
just your thread holder, your spool holder.
I have a new machine, so it has the indented spindle. So if I have old thread, my mother gave me thread. I don't know how old it is, so it's not going to work well on this machine.
Probably not. And for one thing, old thread tends to deteriorate and get brittle. So if your thread is too old anyway, it's probably not a good idea to use it because it's going to break more. I know those old bunches that you hate to waste them, and you can try it. depends on your machine if it will, and the thread. If the thread has not deteriorated, if it's not too old, try it on your machine and see if your machine is picky about it or not.
All right, cool.
Yeah, because a lot of machines don't really care, you know. Honestly, some machines are just pickier than others. Yeah, that's a general rule of thumb about the placement and the kind of wrapping, but if you've got something, try it. And if it works, your machine's not as picky.
Mhm.
Honestly, that's, yeah, it's not rocket science unless you get to the computerized ones, and then it might be.
Any suggestions for the material of the thread? Cotton versus plastic.
Polyester. Yeah,
Yes.
which is basically plastic. Yeah. Honestly, a lot of people will tell you you need to match the thread, the content of your thread to your fabric. When it comes right down to it, I'm not that picky, and I usually use polyester thread for everything, unless I'm doing something. I do historical costumes, and unless I'm doing something historically accurate where I'm hand sewing and doing all that junk, I don't bother with it. It's a matter of personal preference. But generally speaking, if you've got cotton fabric, a lot of people will tell you cotton thread. Yeah. If you've got silk fabric, you do want silk thread, because individual silk threads are weak and polyester and cotton threads are stronger. And if you have a problem with, and your clothes get caught on something, it's going to rip the silk instead of the stitching. And you really want it sewn up with something weaker than your fabric. So if you're using silk fabric, pop for the silk thread. Just in case you happen to be clumsy like me and catch your clothes on everything and, you know, pop your stitches. Okay. So when you're threading your machine, most machines, first of all, for the ones that stand up and down, you want your thread coming off the back, not the front. If it's coming off the front, I don't know if you can see that. If it's coming off the front, just flip your spool over. This one is that. For the ones that are sideways, it doesn't matter. Now to thread your machine, you're basically going to catch it in something with a thread guide, and then you're going to go down, up, catch it, down, and thread it. And most of them will do it the same way. So you go to the back, you go down, up, down, needle. Okay. And a lot of the newer ones will have a guide. Now, I don't know if you can see, but this is not actually part of the actual threading of the machine. This is a guide for this thing over here, which is to wind the fabric on your bobbin. So you have two threads on your machine. You have a thread, you have a spool coming off the top, and you have a bobbin that you put thread on, and it goes down under the needle. And when you're sewing, the thread comes off the top and it meets the one on the bottom, and inside the machinery twists them together so that they're locked like this. So you're working with two different threads. So if you need to thread your bobbin, I mean, if you need to put fabric or thread on your bobbin, you do that first. Okay. There are different bobbin styles. The kind you use will depend on your machine. The majority of them will either be completely flat or have some curve to it. This one takes ones that are completely flat. And the kind you use will depend on your machine. So I can't say buy this one for this machine. But for the most part, most machines.
Is this flat or?
That one's flat. Yes. I mean, you will know if it's curved. You will see a distinct cupping if it's a curved one. This one, it sits down on the thing. It's completely flat. It does not rock at all. It's flat. Now these can be plastic or metal. Some machines that are temperamental may prefer one or the other. Mine doesn't matter. So the shape, it's just a matter of what shape it is. They usually come in like plastic or aluminum. So now if you're wanting to put the thread on here, there will be, I'll find the end of my thread. And I will put it on around, just make it around that little thing. It's got a little spring-loaded tension disc in there that holds the thread in there and adjusts the speed that it comes off the spool. Now, these will have a little hole in them, either on the top or bottom, and you thread it up through the hole. You see that?
You mean the thread that comes from the back?
The thread that comes from the back. Yes. You do not want to thread it down to the needle first. Don't thread it to the, it just comes up here and it comes around this thing and it gets threaded through the little hole right there.
Can you show again how to start threading it through the top?
You should just have a little part. It just comes right up here and it just, it doesn't get threaded around it. It just gets stuck under this little lever. It just
doesn't go over here.
No, this is just a little thing to make sure it comes off of the spool smoothly. Okay. Then you thread it up through the hole from the center or from the inside up to the outside. Then you put your finger on there and catch that little end and give it a few times around.
What do you do with this tail of the little thing? It just hangs?
Well, you already have thread on yours. This is if you don't have any thread on your bobbin.
I see.
Okay. So now when you got it around a few times, it should be caught enough to where you can let go of the top little thread. Then it goes on this thing over here. Coming off the back of the spool. Then you push this to lock it in place. That does two things. When you push that over there, it will usually disengage the needle so that when you wind it, your needle's not going to go up and down randomly. It will also put it up against this little knobby thing here. And when your bobbin gets full, that knob will press up against the thread and shove it over to the left and you'll know it's done. Then you basically step on the foot pedal. And I'm going to come down. I'm going to let you come. I'm going to come down here. I've got over here, I've got a plug that comes down and it splits in two. One side goes over to the plug-in. The other side goes to my foot pedal. I step on this gently and it will start turning. I also have an on-off switch on the side here. That turns it on, and usually that should turn on a little light bulb here too. So, and that thing on the bottom is called a foot pedal. And so I'm going to, I shouldn't have all this extra loose thread up here. I should have it kind of snug. Okay, I'm going to turn it. I'm going to start the foot pedal. It's going to start rotating that. And it's going to go this way. This is why you need to make sure your thread is coming off the back of here, because it's going to go this way, clockwise. And you just sit there and run it. And apparently this machine is old enough that it actually did not disengage the needle. So my needle is actually going up and down. Most new machines will not do that. Okay. But I'm gonna just run this a little bit. Now in this part, you don't want to go as fast as possible. You want to do it smoothly. If you go too fast, especially if you're using polyester thread, if you go too fast, it can stretch it and cause it to do weird tensiony things. Okay, normally I would just complete this until it popped back over. I don't have time for that, so I'm going to just take this off, and I'm going to, I apologize, I keep hitting things on my phone, and I'm just going to cut the thread. Now I have to put this down here. Okay. Now, most new machines nowadays will have this is what we call a drop-in bobbin. You'll take the little plastic thing off. You will drop this in, and then you will catch it with the thread coming off the top. So I will show you how to put this in. Now, again, the thread needs to be coming off the back of the bobbin. So it should come off. I don't know if you can see that, but it should come off the back. I'm going to drop it down in like that. I'm going to zoom in closer here so you can see. On this thing, there are 2 notches.
Disappeared.
Sorry. Yeah, I keep hitting a button on my phone. Oh. When I put my phone back in the clamp, I hit the power button. Sorry. Okay. On this bobbin thing, you will see a couple of notches. You will see a notch in the front and a little kind of notch over on the side. When I put this bobbin in here, I'm going to just set it down here with the thread coming off the back. Set it down there. Now I'm going to maneuver the thread so it's sticking out the front notch. Just kind of pull it straight out that front notch and then pull it straight to the side. And it should be caught under a little thing in between those 2 notches. There's a little springy clip that should catch it. So you bring it out the front, pull it to the side and make sure it catches, and then just let it lay. Okay. I don't know how much. Can you see the way it is? I hope so. Okay.
Not much.
Okay. Let me. Okay. I do not have a flashlight or anything. Okay. Let me zoom in let me turn on another light and zoom in as close as possible.
You don't
I
have
have a
a
flashlight somewhere.
on your phone?
I probably do here. Okay. So thread's coming off the back. Drop it. Whoops. Drop it straight down. Now the thread's coming off the back here, but I need to bring it to the front. So I'm going to just pull it around till it's around the front. And it's in that front notch. See, that little thread is going right in that notch. Pull it tight and to the side. And it is now caught under this little clip. Now we're going to thread the sewing machine. Let me get this thing here. All right, I'm using a little. I'm using a little clip like this that is kind of semi-problematic that I have to keep adjusting. Okay. So your thread is over here. It's coming off the back. Now, this is your thread guide. It's just there to keep your thread in the right position. And it's got a little thing where you clip it in. Let me zoom in over there and see. Has a little hook right there that you just catch the thread in.
Mm-hmm.
Then you, with the thread, you go down, up, down, up, and you'll see a little metal thing that's going up and down here. You see that?
Where? Uh-huh.
I don't know what the technical name of it is, but I call it the little sea serpent because it always reminds me of like the Loch Ness Monster, just poking its head up. Old machines, it will have a little hole that you can thread it through. New machines, you just kind of bring it around to the back and catch it, and it will grab it. Then you bring it down again. And near your needle, you will have something, a little hook that's going to grab that you bring it around, and it's going to be, you just catch the thread in it. You usually have two, one that's right up here by the machine and one that's down near the needle. So I just bring it and make sure it catches that one. Use my other hand, make sure it catches this hook.
I don't see the second hook.
Okay. Right here.
Ah.
See this little thing?
Uh-huh.
Right there. That's a little hook. I just bring it around and I catch it behind there. Those two hooks are just to keep the thread in the right position as you're sewing.
So from which side do you wrap around, left or right? The last hook.
Whichever one that gets your hook. Whichever one your hook is on. If your hook's on the right hand side, you'll wrap it around the right. If your hook on this machine is on the left side, wrap it to the left. You just kind of pull the thread back there and catch it in that little hook. Then you'll need to just take the thread and thread it through the needle. And I apologize, I am blind and I am currently about 1.5 feet away from my machine. Sometimes you will need to like trim it because the end will get kind of fuzzy.
You mean the top thread to thread through the needle, right?
Yes, the top thread is coming down through the machine. Excuse me. I am going to have to figure out how to do this while staying away. Normally I get my head right up in there and stick my face up in it.
Show the hook again, please.
Oh, okay. There's a hook. There's one right here. See how that it's got a little opening right there? You just hook around there. This one has a hook right here on this side. Actually on the needle casing. Sometimes some machines will have a hook over here instead. But there usually is one up here by the machine and one down by the needle.
Do they always have both?
I'm sorry?
Do they always have both?
Not always. Most of them do. Just for added protection. Sometimes you'll only see them with one of them. And so I'm going to thread this through here. Okay. All right. And so I've got this done. Now somewhere on your machine, either on the side here or on the back, will be a little lever that is used to raise and lower this thing. This thing is called your presser foot right here. And the lever is used to raise and lower that. By the way, when your fingers are up here, take your foot away from the foot pedal on the ground. Do not go in, rest your foot on there thinking, oh, I won't push it. You'll lean forward and you'll push that thing and it'll start going. Take your foot off the pedal and set it on the floor before you put your fingers up by that needle. Number one safety tip. The longer you sew, the more likely it is you will eventually sew through your finger. I don't know a sewer yet who has not. And I have personally sewn through. The needle came down here and sewed right through and pierced right by my fingernail. Fortunately, you know, that only happened once. So, okay. So you have this threaded. Your presser foot should be up. It should not be pressed down. When your presser foot presses down, what happens is up inside your machine, it kind of squeezes your thread so that it is tight.
Okay.
And you don't want to do that because see how I'm pulling and pulling and pulling and it's not going? That's because I've got the presser foot down. You want to do that when you're actually sewing, you put that down. But when you're just working with it, you always pull it up. Now, we need to get that bottom thread coming out of here. We need to pull it up through the little hole right under that foot. And how you do that is you grab the top thread that's in the needle, hold it. Then you take your other hand, your right hand, will turn this knob. This is your manual knob to raise and lower your needle. When you're threading, if your little Loch Ness monster is not peeking up, you can actually turn that knob to get it to peek up so that you can catch it. Okay. So I am holding on to the thread from the needle. I am turning with my right hand toward me, down and up. And when it gets all the way to the top, you will feel it loosen. You will feel it catch. As you're doing the down part, you won't be able to pull this thread. But as it reaches the top, you'll feel something pop loose and you'll suddenly be able to pull it. And it has now raised a tiny little loop. See that? See that tiny little loop of thread? It has raised, that is the loop of thread from your bobbin. It has raised it up through the hole. And then I just take something and I poke it through the loop and I pull. So now I no longer have the thread coming off the bottom. It is now threaded up through the hole. And now I have two threads on the top. Now I push this, I put the little plastic part back in place. Some machines you will actually pop the whole, my machine at home, I actually have a little lever and I'll pop this whole plastic off and set it aside. If yours pops off and you set it aside, have to set it aside to do this, make sure you set it someplace safe that you're not going to knock it under your table or anything, because it's clear, it's hard to see if you lose track of it. Okay, so I've got two threads coming off the top. I need to, on my foot here, there's a little slot right in front. I need to bring those threads on. I need to make sure that the top thread comes down underneath inside that foot, so that what I've got now is on the bottom, I have got the bobbin thread coming up from the bottom and coming out to the side. The needle, the top thread is coming down through the needle, going down in this little slot, and it's under here, and they're both cut out onto the side. And that's where I'm ready to start sewing. Now, to give you a little terminology about the stuff down here, we've talked about the bobbin. This is a presser foot. There are different styles of these that you can, and it unscrews with this little knob right here, and you can unscrew it and put another one on. There's different configurations of little presser feet to do various different things, but the vast majority of the time, I use 2 different kinds of presser foots. One is this standard one, which I do with a straight stitch, or this will also do a zigzag stitch, which is the back and forth motion like that. That's why it has this a longer slot in the center. I will also sometimes swap it out for something called a zipper foot, which is a skinnier foot that you can use to sew on zippers, and it'll get right up and let you sew right up to the edge of the teeth. Because anything with volume that goes under here may make it skew to the side. So the vast majority of the time, all I use are those 2 presser feet. You can even get ones that that will pop off the bottom, and you can just pop the bottom one off and then just pop it back on. The part that the presser foot is attached to, the up and down part, this is called the shank. And they have different heights. When you go to buy different presser feet to change out here, if you decide you want to try others, there are different kinds of feet you will see. You will sometimes see this one is a low shank presser foot, which means it only sits up, bottom of that shank, metal bar, only sits up about 3/4 of an inch off the surface. That's a low shank.
Once again, which part is a shank?
The metal bar.
That
right there.
This one.
This is the shank. And if the end of that bar, most of them will be straight up and down. And if the bottom of that bar is only about 3/4 of an inch off their surface, you've got a low shank. If the bottom of your bar is like that far off the surface, you've got a high shank. And when you go to buy a different foot or a replacement presser foot to replace this, you need to know which one you got so that you can replace the right one. Now, if you are using an old-fashioned machine, that is somewhere from if you're using like a Singer machine, that is from somewhere from the 50s to the, I'd say, early 80s, you might actually find ones where the shank is actually at a slant. They did that for a while because it allows more visual access to your fabric, but they don't make them anymore. So you will never find these on new machines. But if you're working on an old machine, which I love working on old machines, honestly, you might find one like that. And if you're freaked out going, why is my straight up and down bar, why is it slanted? Well, that's why. You just have to do special presser feet for that. Okay. By the way, you might ask, why would I want to use an old machine? Well, frankly, they last longer. We've got machines nowadays have plastic gears.
So I decided I was
plastic gears break. Any machine, most machines before, say, the 60s. Most of them are all metal parts. And as long as you keep them cleaned and take them in for maintenance every couple of years, you have them cleaned and adjusted and take them in for maintenance, they will last forever. Okay. This machine that I brought in today, first of all, weighs about 15 pounds. Seriously. It is from the late 30s, early 40s. And it is all metal, and it still works just as perfectly today as it did when it was new. The only parts you might have to replace on old machines are this little rubber piece here, and they have a little belt that runs the motor, runs the knob. These used to be leather. So those two items you will have to replace on older machines, but other than that, you can probably get them for good prices at yard sales. If it's heavy as all get out, it's probably an all metal machine.
So the heavier the better.
Yeah, pretty much. The heavier the better. The heavier means the heavier it is, the more metal parts is in it. Okay, so what have you got on your machine? Well, you have somewhere on the top, you should have a tension button, which goes from 0 to 9. And right around the middle, it should say like auto or automatic or something like that. This is, remember I said when the thread goes in here and you put down the presser foot, it squeezes the thread to catch it tight. That is how tight it squeezes the thread. The tension on the bobbin is it keeps tension on the thread by catching it underneath that little clip. And you need both of them to be at an even tension so that you don't get loose threads on the top or bottom. If you find yourself with a lot of loose thread at the bottom, take all your thread out, take your bobbin thread out, put it all back in. And if it still does it, play with the tension up here and see if getting it higher or lower will help fix the problem. That's usually a problem with your tension. If that doesn't fix your problem of the threads bunching up or getting loose, then you'll probably need to have it adjusted. If you have a sewing machine and you want to get it adjusted, Missouri Sewing Machine Company, they have several locations around town, and they are very good. They've been in operation as long as I've been alive and before, and I'm in my 50s. So, and if you don't use your machine too often, you won't need it adjusted very often. But every once in a while, the timing might get wrong, and it may try and catch the threads at different times. The top and the bottom parts might get out of alignment with each other, in which case you just need to have it adjusted and it'll be fine. And they'll clean it and oil all of the metal parts and everything inside too. Okay, so that's your tension on the top. You will also have something that's a stitch length. This is to adjust how long or short your stitches are when you're stitching. You usually, for normal stitching, want to keep it between 2 and 2.5. That's normal stitching. 0 will just sit there and sew in the same spot over and over and over again. 4 will make pretty long stitches that are easy to rip out. For 4, we call those basting stitches, which means that the thread, you don't want to sew anything securely on a 4 because the stitches are too wide. The fabric will pull apart. But if you want to sew something temporarily to keep it in place or try it on and make adjustments, then you want to turn it to 4 to the long stitches, because they're easy to pull out if you need to adjust them. And then when you go and you want to sew your regular, you want to sew it permanently, turn it down to about 2 to 2 1/4 before you sew. You will also have usually something that where you can choose a different stitch. Honestly, most of those fancy stitches you really don't need. Bottom line, you can get away with a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch that goes back and forth 95% of the time.
So which one is straight, which one is zigzag on this thing?
You see where it goes up and down like a back and forth jig-jaggy? That's zigzag. If it's in a straight line, it's straight. If it shows a picture back and forth like this, that's zigzag. This one, you turn it, the farther you turn it, the wider the zigzag gets. On other machines, you might find that you just turn it to zigzag and then there'll be another button to adjust about how wide you want the zigzag to be. Now, zigzag sewing will take a stitch here and then it'll move and take a stitch here and then move, take a stitch here and then take a stitch. And you use that when you are sewing stretchy fabric, because that way when you put this fabric on a stretch, that zigzag will let the stitching flex and you won't pop your stitches. You will also sometimes use, if you've got a fabric like this, see how ravelly this is? If you've got a fabric, the looser it's woven, the more it will unravel. And if you've got a fabric like this that you're just having trouble with a lot, that is raveling on the edges, you can zigzag, just do a loose, like 4 stitch length of 4, just a loose zigzag over the edge, back and forth over the edge, just to keep it from unraveling. So that's when you might use a zigzag. Now, this button is called the reverse. On mine at home, my reverse button is up here, but you should have some sort of reverse button. Normally, when you sew, there are little pieces down here. I doubt you can see this because of the thing, but there are little channels down here that have little metal pokey pieces that are called the feed dogs. And when you sew, those little grippy pieces come up from the bottom and they grip the fabric and pull it to the back. And it just comes up, grips the fabric, pulls it, goes down, comes up, pulls, goes down. That's what keeps your fabric flowing through the machine. You do not push or pull the fabric. The machine will push the fabric for you. It will pull it through for you. Your job is just to guide it smoothly. So normally those feed dogs come up and they pull the fabric backward. If you push this button down, the feed dogs will go in reverse and start pulling the fabric toward you. You're like, okay, well, why would I want that? Why would I want to sew backwards? I'm going to show you. When you are sewing, excuse the jumpiness. When you are sewing, you will put the fabric under your needle, push the lever down so that your presser foot is down and it's gripping the fabric, and you will start sewing. And if you push push it down and the motor won't engage, you hear it, but the needle won't go. Sometimes in the old machines, you just have to grab the knob and get it started. It's like a little jump start. The new machines don't usually generally have that problem, but the old machines, you may actually have to grab that knob up on the right and get it started. Well, what you'll do, put that to straight stitch, is you will take a couple of stitches, push this knob down, take a couple more stitches backward. Just, you don't need to do it very much, just 1 or 2 stitches. Let it go and then keep stitching. And you're going to do that at the beginning and end of every set of stitches. So when you've finished sewing this batch, then you'll do it again. Take a couple of stitches and let it go. What that does, and by the way, if you've taken a couple of stitches and you do this and you can't pull it out, it's having trouble, that's because your needle is not all the way at the upright position. Remember what I said about when it reaches the top, it kind of lets loose? Make sure it's all the way to the top and it will pull out smoothly. And then you cut your threads off at the ends. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but at the beginning and end, you can see just like a couple of little heavier stitches. That's called a back stitch. And that keeps your threads from unraveling. If you don't do that and you pull the fabric, the 2 pieces of fabric apart, your thread will just start sliding out and your seams will just open up. That will keep your threads locked in place. So you want to get in the habit of doing that at the beginning and end of every seam. Unless you do want to just do it temporarily. In that case, if you're just doing it temporarily to try it on and make adjustments, then you don't need to do that because you don't want them locked in place. Now, when you've cut off your thread, if you're the kind that you're like, oh, I don't want to waste threads, so I'm going to make sure they're really small up here. So I just have 2 little tiny threads. I'm not going to waste my thread. You don't want to do that. Because if your thread is short like that, what's going to happen is when you start sewing, the tension is going to just pull that thread right out of your needle. Don't worry about wasting the thread up here. If it's too short, make sure that it's long enough, and then make sure also that the top thread comes down underneath that foot. Make sure your thread is at least, I like to have it at least like 4 to 6 inches long. Because there's nothing more annoying than if you cut these off too short and you start sewing and you have to stop and rethread your needle. Don't worry about wasting a few inches of thread. Now, a lot of machines will actually have a slot on the back of the shank where you can actually just wrap your thread around and slide it down that shank and cut it. And so you'll see a lot of older sewers who do that. And let me see if I can get you a close up. See that little notch right there? I don't know if you can see it. Let me get something white behind it so you can see.
I do.
You have a little...
Right in the middle?
Yeah, right in the middle of the shank. There's a little notch right there. That's a little cutting notch for your thread. You just wrap your thread around there and so you'll see a lot of old school sewers will just wrap their thread around the back and slide it down to slice their thread.
Mine doesn't slice.
Yeah. Well, because it's probably not very sharp anymore. Do any of you have a very old machine? Okay. I'm just going to give you a little view of what the bobbins look like on an old machine, just in case somebody decides to, because once you start, what was that, Barb?
Kenmore.
1937 Kenmore.
Wow.
Nice. Okay, so you probably have a different style of bobbin. You probably have a bobbin like this, which does not drop into the top.
Right.
It's on the side.
Huh.
These are a little different because they can't rely on gravity to hold them in place. They actually are kind of like clipped in there. You should reach your finger down, and there's a little part here that kind of pulls up. That's your little handle. Grab that and you can just pull it out. Now I'm going to put my phone back in the clip deal. Now, you have the same kind of bobbin. This one happens to be metal. The older style are usually metal, but it's got the little holes, and you load the thread on the bobbin the exact same way. Now, but once you've got the thread loaded on here, you need to put it in here. And the clip part, remember we put it in that notch and slid it to clip it? It has a little notch right there. And this part at the top is the clip. So you want to get your thread coming off the top of your bobbin and just set it in there. Then you take your thread and pull it tightly this way to catch on that little clip, and pull it till it goes down under that little plate and comes out the hole. It's just like a little spring-loaded notch.
Okay.
You got it? Okay. Now, don't let go of that, because this bobbin is not held in by anything other than that thread. So when you're dealing with this, always keep your thumb on that bobbin, or else it will fall down, roll off under your table. Ask me how I know. I know. Okay. So then what you will do is you will take that and you're going to, oh, I have lots of cat hair. I haven't cleaned this machine in a while. Okay. Your little lever thing, this little has a sticky up part. And you should have a little notch somewhere in your metal casing. See that little notch? That little pointy part goes in that notch. And it just slides on. And it should pop. You should hear it click in place. If it will not slide in, your needle is down. Turn the knob to bring your needle back up so that it's not, so the machinery is not catching. And try it again. From there, from there, you would do the exact same thing. Thread the machine, hold on to the thread, turn the crank, and it should bring the loop of the bobbin thread up.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Barb, is your machine electric or completely manual?
37, it's electric.
Wow.
Electric machines started coming in around, give or take World War I. And you'll see a lot of old treadle machines with the foot pedals that will actually be converted to a motor. And they will actually have a motor. Oh, So let's see if I can show you this. They will actually have a motor that is clamped on the back. This one does not have an internal motor. It has a motor that is actually screwed on the back and run by a belt. And that's what all your old style machines will be. Because for a long time, they offered them either with electricity or without. And so you will see for several decades, you will see the motor on the outside because it was an optional added, like 4-wheel drive. You know, it was an optional thing.
What about the manual that you had the handle here on this deal? And
yeah. You would have the handle there, and you would, those are called crank ones. And this knob would actually have a crank on it, and you would hold it, and you would have to get used to doing guiding with one hand with your left hand and cranking with the other.
that's why I never learned to sew.
Yeah.
Wow.
Your grandma was old school. My grandma was too. My grandma had a foot pedal one, and what they would do with the foot pedal is they had a special cabinet that had a little pedal in the bottom that was attached by a little well, like one of these things here. And it would attach, but it would attach to a foot pedal on the base, and as you rocked your foot back and forth, it would turn it, and it would, you could get up a rhythm and get it going nice and smoothly. That's actually what my grandmother had, and what my sister learned how to sew on. Okay. Things that you might need to know. When you're sewing, your foot plate, that's this metal piece here, should have little notches or little lines. That is so that you can adjust your the distance you're sewing from the edge. Modern sewing patterns, American modern sewing patterns are all 5/8 inch, which is just a little over 1/2 inch. European sewing patterns are more likely to be 1/2 inch. As you're sewing, you may actually, you know, because your thread goes down in here and it gets rubbed around, and it's rubbing on all sorts of things, you may find lint builds up in here. So every once in a while, you'll want to, especially if you're sewing fuzzy fabrics, you'll want to pop that out and I take a little soft paintbrush or a makeup brush, just whatever is soft and fuzzy, and you'll want to take that out, and you'll just kind of want to run it around inside and just kind of catch the lint and pull it out and just kind of gather up all of the dust bunnies that eventually end up inside there. And if there's a bunch of it, if you've been sewing for a while, this actually unscrews, and you can get little and it unscrews and it just pops off and gives you access to more of the parts underneath there, so you can clean the dust bunnies out even more. If you don't want to do that, take it into the dealer or the Missouri Sewing Machine Company, and they'll clean it when they're adjusting it. Now, for needle, how you get the needle off and on, there is a little clamp that is holding the needle, and it's got a screw. And you unscrew this, and it loosens the clamp, and the needle will slide right out. Now, if you have an old machine, it will probably situate it so that the needle is threaded from the side, where the hole is like sideways this way. New machines, they're threaded this way.
And this one is old or new?
Yeah, this one I think is this is a newer machine.
That's
so,
why I couldn't put the thread through it.
Yeah, it threads in from the front. This machine is old because it's like 30s or 40s. And then the hole in the needle is actually on the side. And it's not a different needle. It's just the different way that the clamps it into onto the shank, or onto the oh, I forgot the technical term for that thing, but the needle holder. Your needles, I don't know if I can get you an up close thing of this. I should have printed out a little thing, but your needles will have one rounded side and one flat side. Oh, see how it's flashing there? See, that's the flat side.
Mm-hmm.
And then this would be the rounded side. And if it's a modern machine, the flat part will go to the back and up inside there. On the old-fashioned machines, the flat part will go to the side.
On the new ones?
On the old ones, it will be to the side. The flat part will be on the side. On the new ones, the flat part will be in the back. And you basically just stick it up in the little hole and tighten the clamp. And you can tell if it's in wrong, it won't want to stay secure. So if I try to put this in sideways, it's not gonna, it's like I'm having trouble even getting it up in the hole because it doesn't want to go in that way. It wants to go in with the flat part to the back. And now I can't even. Okay, I'm completely, there we go. And I'm tightening it up. And you want to change your needle. Pretty often, pretty regularly. Depending, and you want to choose a needle depending on what fabric you have. They have special needles that are just used with stretchy fabric. They're called ballpoint needles. They don't have as much of a point. They're designed to go down inside the knit and just spread the things and not pierce them. Universal needles, regular needles, will have a really sharp point. And they have leather needles, which actually have a little cutting blade on it. Well, it's a piercing blade. It'll actually have a bigger head on it. These will get dull if you sew too long on one needle.
How long is long?
It depends on how much you're sewing. I've been making masks a lot. And when I was doing constant mask making, I was having to change my needle every couple of days.
Wow.
Well, I was sewing like 8 hours a day for the masks back when this started, to give, because the library provided fabric and I sewed masks for all the staff. And I was changing my needle like every other day. You do want to keep a good supply of these because they will also break. Okay. When you're sewing, if this gets dull, it will sometimes catch on the fabric, and instead of piercing it, it will catch, and the fabric will actually pull it out of alignment, and it will hit the metal and it will snap. By the way, if you wear glasses or contact lenses, don't sew with your contact lenses in. Switch them out and wear your glasses when you're sewing. Because eventually, one of these needles will snap and you may find the tip of a needle flying at your face. I have known people who, it won't penetrate, but if it flips up into your eye, you can scratch your cornea. And you'd have to wear an eye patch for a few days. And it's not, I know I'm sounding, don't put your fingers up there, you'll pierce through your fingers, or, needles will fly in at your face. It's just, you've got a sharp pointy thing and it's going at 10,000 miles an hour. Things happen if you're not careful. And even if you are careful, it's a little teeny tiny piece of metal. It will sometimes break.
Safety precautions 101.
Safety. And besides, if it happened and I didn't tell you about it, you could sue the library's rear end.
So needles come in different styles or in different sizes?
Yes, both.
Okay.
Okay. Ballpoint is for knit stretch fabrics. Universal is just for regular sewing. And leather needles will specifically say leather. Now, the different sizes, they go from, the most common sizes you will see are 9, 11, 14, and 16. I think that corresponds to the thickness of the needle, because the lower the number, the skinnier the needle and the more delicate fabric. If you're going to be sewing delicate fabric, which, first of all, do not start on the delicate fabric. I know it's beautiful. Do not start on fancy fabric. Do not sew sequins. Do not sew chiffon. Do not sew anything shiny. Shiny and velvet. Ooh, boy, are they a pain in the patootie to work with.
What about rayon?
Well,
Yeah.
rayon is, okay, rayon is a type of rayon is a type of thread, a type of material. It's not a type of fabric.
Huh?
So you may say, okay, this is a weird thing. People say, oh, start sewing with cotton. Okay, you can have quilting cotton, which is a nice, smooth, even finish with a little bit of a stiffness to it. You can have cotton that is denim. I mean, jeans are cotton. You don't want to start sewing on them. They're really thick. You can make velvet out of cotton. You can make chiffon, light, airy, fluffy scarf material out of cotton.
Oh.
So there's a difference between the fiber, that's the word I'm trying to finger, the fiber, and the kind of fabric it is. So rayon, if I remember right, rayon is this weird combination of a natural and synthetic. It's actually made from, it was one of the first synthetic fabrics created, but it's not made from plastic like the polyester is. Rayon, if I remember correctly, is made out of wood pulp. So it's synthetic, but it acts more like a cotton and a wool. It's more breathable.
Natural material.
Yeah. But it's what kind of fabric is the fiber made into. If it's floaty and slippery and shiny, don't start with that. If the rayon is made into something that has a little bit more body, that has a good feel to it, that's fine.
So you're
learn
saying
on something that's
heavier weight fabric to get more comfortable with the machine.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And something that's not shiny. Shiny means that's very smooth. And if it's very smooth, the fabric has a tendency to slip and slide.
So should we also avoid mercerized thread for a while?
Not necessarily, because the thread is not as big a deal because of the tension and the machine grips the thread. I mean, yeah, the silky thread is a little harder to deal with, but not as much as the silky, shiny fabric is. The problem with the shiny fabric is when you're loading it through the machine and you've got 2 layers. Okay. Your feed dogs in the bottom are going to come up and grip the bottom layer of fabric and pull through. The slipperier your fabric is, the more likely those layers are to shift and it won't pull the top layer as easily as it does the bottom layer. So you might find the bottom layer moving just a little bit more than the top does, and it will start skewing. You will have to use a lot more pins if you're working with shiny material. So get used to it with a flat material first, and then go on to the silky, poofy, delicate stuff later once you feel comfortable.
So
Okay.
linen will work too?
Linen is fine. Linen, you can't make linen into a shiny smooth fabric. Just because of the nature of linen, it will not make a shiny smooth finish. So it's any plant material, like the basic plant material. Yeah, so it's the weave of the fabric that really makes the difference. But linen, yeah, there's no way you're going to get linen shiny and slick ever. It just doesn't happen.
Foolproof material.
Yeah, it's easy to sew, and it's good and nice, crisp. It's got a crispness to it. It's not all drapey, wibbly wobbly. But of course it does wrinkle pretty badly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think, does anybody have a question about their machine that I didn't cover? Because today's class is like introduction to your machine.
Cheryl,
Yes.
I have an up and down button. It's like a lever. It's right by my on and off switch, and it moves the underneath the foot. It's moving it
Okay.
down versus up, but I think you want to sew in the up position.
Yes.
Okay.
What that does is that drops the feed dogs down so they don't grip the fabric.
Okay.
Some machines have that option to where you can drop those little grippy pieces down so
Okay.
they never come up.
Gotcha.
You do that on things where you want to do what they call free motion quilting.
Okay.
Those old machines, you know, and it lets you move the fabric how you want it in like swirls and stuff.
Oh no, I just want to go straight for starters.
Then leave them up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Cheryl, are these supposed to move at the same
Well,
direction?
okay.
Like I move one and it moves another.
Okay. Probably because whatever setting you've got this, okay, you're probably like down here, or it's, if you've got one that has to be at a certain width or whatever, you may find in certain settings, if you turn one knob, or if you turn one knob here and then try to adjust the length, it will kind of move it, especially if you've got it on one of the buttonhole settings. These settings are for buttonholes, in which case you will set it down to a very, very low stitch length.
And where is the pointer to which you adjust? Is this on the side?
What pointer? Oh,
you
no,
know, the
usually it's on the top. It's at the top. If you look back behind the knob,
oh yeah,
there's a little blue thing. Now, Barb, I don't know if you have an adjustable. Do you have a zigzag machine? Because some of those old machines do not have zigzag.
I do.
Okay, on my machine here, what I have is, this is my stitch width for my zigzag. And this is the knob. I unscrew this and pull this to the side, and then I can move this for my stitch width. And if I've got it, so if I wanted it at a 3, to avoid that moving, I will then unscrew this, put it up there, and this will hold it in place.
Okay.
Because frankly, a zigzag is just a regular stitch I mean, a regular stitch is just a zigzag with no width.
Mhm.
So my machine isn't automatically a zigzag unless I put it down here to 0. I put it down on 0 and then it does a straight stitch. I don't have a straight and zigzag. The width I choose is actually my straight or zigzag. So old machines may do weird stuff like that.
Mhm. Okay.
And on old machines, this is my bobbin threader on my old machine. Instead of being straight up and down, your old machines are sideways, and you will put it on here sideways and push this to lock it in place. And when it's full, the lever will pop it up. That may be what yours looks like.
I have the one on top, straight up and down.
You have the one on top. Okay.
Mhm.
Because a lot of old machines have it sideways.
Okay.
But it works exactly the same. If you ever do find one, it's just instead of being upright, the thing is, I mean, but it works exactly the same.
Okay.
People in the past were so smart.
They made things that lasted, didn't they?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Well, because anything that wasn't going to last has been broken a long time ago.
That's right.
Alrighty. Do you have any other questions about the machine?
Nah, next time.
Okay. In that case,
Probably not until I start tearing up thread and fabric between now and the next time.
next week's class is going to be talking about the fabric and how you should treat the fabric, and the basics of sewing, because you shouldn't just get a fabric and start sewing on it. You should always like wash the fabric in the same manner that you're going to wash the finished item. So if you're going to throw the finished item in the washing machine, I don't even bring the fabric in the house before I go into the laundry room. I throw it in the washing machine and wash the fabric first. If you're going to dry clean the fabric, the item, take the fabric to the dry cleaner. Now, if it's a ravelly fabric, you may actually want to, before you throw it in the washing machine, zigzag over the edges loosely so that it won't unravel in the washing machine.
When you send us the mask material, should we wash that before we make the mask?
No, I will. You should wash the fabric before you cut the items out. So
Okay.
I'm going to have it all pre-cut.
Okay.
And I'm going to have it. I'm going to have it washed. I'm going to have it pre-cut.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have it, and I'm going to do that at least a few days in advance so that you won't even have to do anything. And usually they say if you let something set for 3 days, the viruses can't last that long. So I'm going to have them made up hopefully a week in advance. And
We'll kill
that
everybody.
way, yeah, and that way you don't have to worry about me touching it within the last, and it'll be in bags and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I am actually going to switch back to my regular thing. So since you're not going to need anything else. All right. I'm happy to sit here and answer questions if you guys have any questions.
I have a zigzag foot that came on this machine. To do a straight stitch, am I okay to leave the zigzag foot on? Okay.
Yeah.
I might not touch it just because it looks like it's working.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
For
you.
those of you who want to know what she's talking about, let me switch back here. Okay. The foot has an opening. It's like a T-shaped opening across, and then a one down, a little slot down. This is a zigzag foot. This is to give it room to go back and forth in here. Ones that are specifically for straight stitch just have a single hole. They don't have room for back and forth.
Mine
But
does.
this kind is perfectly fine to do straight stitches on. This is your universal basically your universal foot. Like I said, the only time I ever switch this out is for a zipper foot usually.
Oh, right.
Or if I have like a special attachment, I do, because I do historical, I think I mentioned I do historical costumes, and I have a ruffler foot. I have a ruffler that attaches on here, and I take the foot off and I attach the ruffler, and it will actually, as I feed the fabric through, it will actually gather it up like every certain number of stitches. It will actually, grab it and make a ruffle.
Wow.
So I take this off for that, or for zipper foot, and that's really the only times I ever take that off.
So do you call this one zipper foot?
No,
The one that has T
a
whole thing?
zipper foot, no, this is just a regular, this is a this is what
Zigzag.
they might call that a zigzag foot.
Oh yeah, zigzag I meant.
Because it's got room for the opening here. Let me see if I can find, I'm gonna get on my computer and I'm going to look up a zipper foot on my computer, and then I will share a picture of you guys with it.
Next time.
No, actually, I'll just I'm just gonna share my screen with you. I'm gonna mute this.
It's very narrow.
So it's actually getting right up. This is actually a zipper under here, and it lets you get right up close to the edge.
And what are these numbers, lines with numbers on the metal part?
That's so that you can judge how far away from the edge you're stitching. Yeah.
Same here?
Yeah. So here.
And what did you say the modern American?
5/8.
5/8.
So if it says, if it says 5 or 5/8, that's what most sewing patterns that are sold in America will tell you to stitch, excuse me, 5/8 inch away from the edge of your fabric. By the way, these kind of feet are usually pretty good, because usually the standard width of this thing, right on the edge, if you line your fabric up with the edge of this foot, that's 1/4 inch.
Okay.
Mine at home, I have a little one that's extra wide, but it has a little notch on it so that that at 1/4 inch, so that I can tell. But your normal regular presser foot like this, the edge of your foot is going to be usually 1/4 inch.
And what about European patterns?
A lot of European patterns use 1/2 inch.
1/2 inch, so they're wider.
Which in this case, it will say this will be 4/8. Or if it doesn't have a label, this one has a label that says 4/8. But if it doesn't have a label, it'll be the notch just to the left of the 5/8. These notches should go in 1/8 inch increments. The ones with the larger numbers here, the 15 and 20, I believe those are millimeters.
Smart machine.
All right, any other?
Does that look like it might be a zipper? Since this little side will be, like it'll stitch closer?
I think that may be what's called a top stitching foot.
Okay.
That side looks like it's about 1/8 of an inch.
Mm-hmm.
So on modern machines, there might be a knob where you can change the position of your needle. Okay.
Okay.
And you can actually move it over to the right and use this as your top stitching foot.
Okay.
But on old machines like this one, you cannot move the position of the needle. So you can use one of those feet to get it to let you align it to be 1/8 of an inch.
Okay. Good. All right.
Yeah. There's a lot of different kinds of presser feet out there. You'll look on Amazon and they'll sell you packages of 30 different presser feet for your machine. Yeah. You will need 2, maybe 3. If you're gonna sew on like fancy cords and stuff on, decorative stitching on the top, and you want to sew sequins or something, you may need something called a beader foot, the beading foot, that lets the sequins or the cord go underneath the foot. But other than that, one hand of presser feet, one hand. You won't really need much of anything else. Maybe if you're doing skinny little hems, you can do what's called a rolled hem foot that will make skinny little hems and it will roll the fabric for you. But
Okay.
those are actually rather I keep saying pain in the patootie, but pain in the patootie.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get some straight lines on some plain fabric, so I'm okay. Thank you.
You can use that other one, but you'll notice that other one you had did not have an opening where your fabric, your needle could go back and forth. So you cannot do a zigzag on that.
Correct. Right.
So it's mostly used. That one's mostly used just to do a straight stitch, and you can use it for regular straight stitches too.
Okay. Good.
That's perfectly fine.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've.
Anything else?
A lot of questions. I will make a list for the next time.
Okay.
Sounds good. Now,
Yeah.
Blue Valley is is close to me at 151st, that library. Is that a place you can send yours, or do I need to drive downtown?
You will need to come
Be the
to
closest.
one of our branches. Yeah, I
Okay.
can't send it to Johnson County.
Okay.
South branch is the closest to you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, although 151st Street, probably the easiest to get to would be our West branch because it's just up on 78th and State, or
Okay.
yeah, 78th and State.
Okay.
So it's not that far off of the highway.
You're talking about highways.
Yeah, well, 151st and State Line, you'd have to come up 435. The easiest would be come up 435.
Yes.
Probably. And then 435 and 78th Street exit. And it's on 82nd Street between State and Parallel. So that might be easier. Technically, South is closer to you, but it's not going to be easier to get to.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be able to get it picked up.
My boss is calling. The
7:04?
library is actually closed, and she's telling us we have to leave because we closed 5 minutes ago. Okay. I'll see you guys next week, and I will send you a link to the to next week's meeting.
Thank you.
To the recording.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye, Cheryl.